benchmarking and performance, what's really neat about today is that all of the information that we have is actually gathered from some of the work with EDGE, which is part of United Church of Canada, and they have actually created a nonprofit e-learning, and the information from performance management for small businesses is actually derived starting from their own data collection. So it's kind of interesting that way, that it's not just about Small Business Solver or even sometimes our experts, but we actually partner with other organizations as well. So performance management for small businesses is what we're going to be talking about today. And basically the whole idea on this is that what gets measured gets done. So if you don't actually have performance metrics out there or measurements, if you actually don't worry about measurement, it's less likely that you're actually going to be motivating yourself, your employees, and things don't get done as much. So that's kind of the positive side where you're like, okay, if you measure, you're motivating, and you're getting something done. The other side is also, if your measurements, your metrics are incorrect or not thought through enough, the challenge that you face is that maybe you're going to be getting the wrong things done. So the whole idea is what gets measured gets done. So deciding on what your performance metrics are, those are extremely important. Deciding on what you benchmark on is also extremely important. So our goal today is to create performance measures that actually help your business rather than hinder your business. And I think everyone can agree that that's important for us. So what to expect? Well, I have metrics. We'll cover that briefly. We're going to jump into how to actually create them, how to make sure that you actually have a small business balance scorecard, making sure that your metrics help all aspects of your business, not just one. And then, of course, how to monitor it, how to make sure that everything's working. So why are they important? Well, really, most small businesses are already doing this. For instance, do you already have a sales goal? If you already have a sales goal, that's one metric. Do you have a goal for your marketing campaign? Are you trying to get awareness levels, participation levels, have a revenue lift? Any of these metrics would be part of your marketing goal. So there'll always be something that you're doing. And then finally, last one, do you motivate your employees with targets? Maybe you ask every single one of your employees to come up with one idea a month. Maybe you don't have to implement those, but you just want to have a corporate culture of encouraging ideas. So are you already doing this? Next, why are they actually important? Well, we covered this briefly, and it's fairly obvious from the last slide. But basically, keep your daily activities on track with your strategy. So if you have your performance metrics out, measures out, everyone's trying to strive for them. Goals, of course, are motivating. You have benchmarks to make sure that things continue to improve. And when things start to slide on you, it's a quick litmus test to be able to see that immediately. So it's not 3 or 6 months down the road. You can see that within a month or even a few weeks. You'd know right away that something's up. And then, of course, employee engagement. So that's tied into the motivation side of it. So there's a few facts and fiction out there about metrics, just covering them off really quickly, is that the best measures are obvious. That's actually incorrect, and we're going to see that today. Sometimes you think that sales is all you have to measure. That's not necessarily true. This is easy. We try and make it as easy as possible, but not necessarily as easy as you first think. Again, maybe just measuring your sales revenue is not enough. Next, it can be delegated. No, doing the measures, that's actually something that you should be keeping internally and you should be doing yourself. Focus is needed. That one is true. So definitely spending time to go through this, and hopefully maybe even doing that right now as we go through this and start thinking about which metrics work for you. Tying measures to pay is the only way to motivate. That's actually not true. In fact, with today's YGen, monetary motivation is actually even further down the list of what is important to them. Measures always increase performance, not if they're the wrong measures. So this is actually also false. And finally, measures are in place to ensure staff are spending their working hours on the right activities. This is true. That's the key goal of performance measures, is making sure that your working hours are spent on the right activities. Now, there's some red flags to know whether or not your performance measures today are simply not working. And some of these are actually not designed just for small businesses, but for mid-sized. Some mid-sized businesses have over 100 measures. If you have that, that's not good. Hopefully nobody on the phone has that. Are measures selected by an individual? You should always have consensus from a team, a group, or if you have a board of advisors, you should be getting them to help you identify what measures are the best for your business, or your small business coach, of course. Are there measures that have resulted in dysfunctional behavior? This basically means, do you have a performance measure that didn't end up getting the behavior from your employees or even yourself that you thought that it would give you? And we'll give some examples of that later. And other times that your performance measures have to be changed is, are measures implemented without a cost analysis? So are you actually maybe measuring too much and spending too much time on analysis rather than moving forward? So that's another big red flag. And then, is there cynicism about performance measures? So does your organization, if it's more than just you, if you have employees, are they not feeling as though it's important? Those are all red flags for you. And out of these, one that I actually really wanted to highlight was that if you have too many metrics, it's harmful, because that came up twice. And I find this one really interesting because for one of my own companies, I actually used to own a telemarketing consulting firm. So we basically helped people with their sales strategy, and then we had a handful. We had 12 people who actually did cold calling and telemarketing for small business and medium-sized businesses. And what was really interesting is when we first started doing this, we actually thought that there were about 20 different metrics that our clients wanted to know about. And what we ended up realizing is that it wasn't 20. It was actually boiled down to 5 or less. And what was interesting is we were spending a lot of time or a lot of money trying to gather this data, report this data on a weekly basis, and sometimes even having it real-time data that just wasn't necessary. So having too many metrics and overkilling it just doesn't always make sense. And when we actually realized it wasn't 20 metrics and it was a simple 5-metric thing or measures that we had to report on, we actually ended up saving 15 hours a week of work for one of our employees. 15 hours of data entry and analysis that wasn't necessary. So this one to me is near and dear, and hopefully you realize that we can boil this down. So at this point, why metrics? And hopefully we've covered that. Next, we're going to jump into how to actually create them. And we start with a terminology that is used throughout large, medium, and sometimes small businesses, but it's something to know about, KPIs. KPIs are basically key performance indicators, and that's really what we're trying to create, is we're trying to identify within your small business what are the key performance indicators that we want to be tracking to. So these are measures that focus on the critical factors for both today's and tomorrow's success. So it's weeding out all the garbage and making sure that we're focused on the key performance indicators that are for today's and tomorrow's success. So a KPI should be action-oriented, it should be meaningful, it should be relatable for the team, it has to be supported by management if you're a larger company, so if you have 10, 20 people working there. Should be something that you can see at any given time, so 24/7, daily or weekly. Should be actually non-financially based, so it should be tied more to your strategy, should be motivating, and those are the top pieces for your KPI, so it's a checkpoint for you. Now, how to actually create a specific KPI measure or metric that we're trying to identify. There's a 5-step process that we're going to go through. The first is human behavior, understanding that how people are going to react to the measures that you put in place. Second, making sure that it's strategic as well as balanced. So this is part of the balanced scorecard. Next, figuring out what your critical success factors are, which then pop out our measures for us. And then finally, being able to monitor and control them in the future. So let's jump into this. The first is human behavior. And what I've shown here is actually an example of a metric. And the question is, how could this metric go wrong? How could this be a dysfunctional behavioral-based metric? And here it is. Lawyers are measured by the number of cases closed. Human behavior dictates in a measure like this that a lawyer might not pay as much attention to your clients because they're just focused on closing cases. Maybe they don't actually take cases to court, which could be a larger revenue stream for a law firm. And maybe it's in the best interest of their clients, but because they get measured based on cases closed, they just try and close as many cases as possible. Maybe it means that more time-consuming case, they actually refer to other law firms. So when we look at our metrics, we have to start thinking about how is that going to actually impact human behavior. So looking at this one, how could it go wrong? And I gave a couple of examples. And this can actually be applied for any industry. So here's another one for a truck driver, so within a transportation company. How could this metric go wrong? Penalties to a truck driver on being late for a delivery. So you'd think, okay, this is a great one because on-time delivery is so important. But if you actually penalize the truck driver for being late, maybe they're going to speed. Maybe they're going to get traffic tickets. Maybe they're going to be reckless drivers and impact your brand image. So there's all these other negative things if you choose the wrong measure. So thinking about human behavior is critical. The next thing that you have to think about with your performance measures is being balanced and strategic. So you don't want everything to only be financially based. In fact, there's 5 main components here that you should be worried about. You should have to make sure that your performance measures analyze whether or not you're hitting financial goals, customer satisfaction goals, innovation goals, your internal process, your staff or your volunteers or your board or your management, so all your people, and then finally your environment, so the community that you're in. And this can actually be broken down even further. And remember, these slides are actually already posted online, so you can grab all this information. But for a small business, this is actually all the components that you should actually be monitoring at the same time with a performance measure. So this is the Small Business Balance Scorecard. And it takes these 6 sections that we just created and then glue this up to show all the components under each of them. So in the small business world, under financial lies the revenues and assets and sales. Customer service levels could also include your close rates and your retention rates and your prospects and number of new prospects. People, retention, succession planning, training, which is your professional development plan. External environment, branding, public awareness, charities that you're supporting, continuous improvement. So these are all the areas that your performance measures need to touch upon. Once you realize that, this is when you start worrying about your critical success factors. And these are basically your strategic drivers within your company that are going to help you with these 6 components. So these are need-to-haves in your organization. And they're always related to strategy. They should be easy to understand, and everyone in your company should get it. So a good example here would be for Google. Well, their tagline or their slogan is "Don't be evil." Maybe not the best tagline or slogan. However, it's a critical success factor for them. It drives their organization. Don't be evil. And that critical success factor, if we look at these 6 components, that's huge for them. Customer service levels might actually increase because their critical success factor is don't be evil. People, well, people want to work for a company that's not evil. It's probably they have higher retention because of that critical success factor. Their branding, their community involvement, because their critical success factors don't be evil, it's actually touched on at least 3 components of the Small Business Balance Scorecard. So jumping to the next part, what are other critical success factor examples? So maybe having engaged staff, having the best people, focus on your people, innovation daily, growing leaders, making decisions slowly and implement rapidly, always deliver on time. These would be key strategic critical success factors for your business. And really what we recommend is that you only have a few of these. So find commonalities between them, and then making sure that you only have 5 to 8 critical success factors out there. When you have these key ones, and don't worry, we actually have a huge list on the blog as well of all of the critical success factors that you can think about. Well, not all of them, but many, about 49 of them actually. You can look through those and figure out which 5 to 8 make sense for your business. Once you have your critical success factor, that's when you figure out what your measurement is. So how do you actually measure them? And here's some examples. So let's say you decided that the critical success factor for your small business was engaged staff. So maybe one of your metrics or your KPIs, key performance indicator, is that your staff attends all the training. So how many staff has missed the training would be one of your measures. And this one's pretty small one, so maybe it's not the best one for you, but it's an example of how you take a critical success factor and turn it into a measure. Another measure for engaged staff could be your employee survey results. So making sure that it's an 8 out of 10 for working there. Another example here would be growing leaders. So maybe within your own organization, you want to actually have an employee of the week. Or if everyone's submitting innovative ideas, acknowledging that during your staff meetings, acknowledging successes. And so part of your measures would be number of recognitions in the past 2 weeks that you've had, and making sure that you're continuing to do that. Another CSF, or critical success factor, could be innovation in your company or being customer-centric. Any of these, then you figure out what your metric is. So for innovation, it could be how many ideas have been submitted in the last 90 days. And again, we have a list of about 80 examples of measures that actually correlate to critical success factors out there, all on the website. And here's some of them. So metric examples. And you're going to notice for each of these, we always have been able to pinpoint it to a specific number. So it's the number of strategic relationships, it could be the number of feedback surveys initiated, number of times the caller hangs up. That could be related to your customer service. And basically, based on your critical success factors, you're able to create these metrics. And it's only a few metrics that you're actually monitoring to. In fact, you want to make sure, again, that it's not too many. In fact, if you can keep it to 3 to 5, that's even better. You definitely don't want to go over 10 because that would take a lot of time and a lot of work to actually be measuring everything. So keeping your KPIs to even 3 would be phenomenal. And again, these are all listed online. So when you're creating your metrics, first you think about how it impacts the human behavior. You make sure that it's aligned to your balanced scorecard, so it's not just financially based, it's customer based, it's community based, it's the environment. Then you figure out within your own business, what are your critical success factors for your business? What do you want to be known for? And this is tied to your strategy. And then finally, you come up with measures that actually match what your critical success factors are. And we've shown lots of examples, and there's lots of examples online. Once you have all of that set up, what you want to do is then make sure that you're monitoring and implementing it correctly. So the last part here is implementation. When you roll this out, you have to make sure that behaviors that you're expecting are actually happening. And don't be scared to change or remove metrics that simply aren't working for you. You need to report regularly. And when you report, make sure that they're simple, they're visual, and that they're very regular. So you're seeing them daily or weekly. And then finally, do not be scared to get rid of a metric that's not working. So if a report's not being read, don't do it anymore. It's just a waste of time and money for you. If a key performance indicator isn't being reviewed or isn't changing, or if it's harmful based on the behavior it's creating, get rid of it. And that's called abandonment. So just as a wrap up, implementation, implement, make sure that you're reporting regularly, and don't be scared to change performance measures if they're not working for you. So I'm hoping that this has helped you guys create a performance measure that actually helps your business rather than hinders it. So remember dysfunctional behavior, avoiding that, and all of the red flags, and tying it to your critical success factors. This is what we've covered, is why it's important, how to create it, making sure it's tied to your balanced scorecard, and monitoring it. Remember, what gets measured gets done, and we have a ton of resources that are also posted online. So just to help everyone online right now find everything that I was talking about, because we do have lots of information, is this is all going to be on Small Business Solver. You can go to Small Business Training, the Small Business Advice blog, and what you're going to find is benchmarking and performance management. When we go there, you can find all the slides. So if you liked any of the information on the Small Business Balance Scorecard or any of those other images, you can grab it. You can download the entire slide presentation. Or we have the examples of the critical success factors. And this is actually a spreadsheet, and what you can see is a list of a ton of examples of critical success factors for your business, and then metrics that actually complement this. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop the recording and open up everything for questions.